Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our latest installment of our COVID-19 resource interviews. I'm Tracy Lehman, the Community Outreach Counselor for Nick Finnegan Counseling Center. And I am here today to talk with our expert, my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Janie LaQue, about anger management and how COVID-19 and the stresses that have come out of this pandemic have impacted the lives of people and especially maybe made anger management issues more severe. And so I'm going to turn it over to Janie to talk a little bit about who she is and her expertise. Hi, Janie.
Hi, I'm Janie LaQue. I have a Ph.D. in social work. I have a marriage and family license and a social work license as well. I've been 27 years in doing clinical therapy. 19 of those years, I worked in criminal justice, both with juvenile offenders and with adults. During that time, I worked with domestic violence offenders as well as gang offenders, those that were dealing with alcohol and drug issues, and sex offenders, and all those carry some kind of level of anger issues with them. 8 years of that 27 years, I worked in clinical therapy as a family and marriage therapist over at the Nick Finnegan Counseling Center. I work with clients seeking anger management, as well as clients dealing with domestic violence, depression, anxiety, and other disorders.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you here to talk to us about anger management and how to help people manage their anger better during this high stress time. Can you tell us a little bit about what anger is really? I think, everyone knows the term anger and that it's an emotion, but I don't think people really know the function of it or why it exists. Do you think you could speak a little bit to that for us?
Anger is an emotion that gets a really bad reputation, okay? Anger can actually help a person relieve stress. And it can also, if you're in a fight or flight scenario, anger can be necessary for your survival. It's how you express the anger that makes it healthy or unhealthy. If you look at the definitions, it's described as a strong emotional signal that something may be going wrong. Our intuition may be informing us that we either need to watch out for something or assert ourselves or to protect somebody else at that. When managed correctly and kept in check, anger can be an important ally to human survival and adaptation, but it can also carry risk. It can alienate people from others, and it can lead to individuals to do things that they're going to regret later. So anger becomes dysfunctional when it works against our best interest or our higher values.
Yeah, people do give anger a bad rep and always think of it as like the scary emotion. I always think of it as the powerful, like our knight in shining armor emotion that protects us from the underlying vulnerable emotions. Can you talk a little bit about what signs somebody might want to look for, especially right now when there's so much stress related to like job security, health, all those things, just being stuck at home with either alone or with family and a lot of together time. What signs or symptoms might somebody be experiencing if their anger is getting unmanageable?
Well, we experience anger from a variety of sources. It can be personal problems such as relationships. It can be difficulties or an event like being in bad traffic. Those are all triggers. Getting in an accident. Memories of a traumatic or an enraging event that took place in the past can also trigger anger. Other reasons that we experience anger could be an early trauma or an event that may affect a person's life. And by affecting his life, it also affects his personality. The things that are triggering right now with the COVID issue, people aren't used to being isolated together or stay at home together. And so right now there's also such things as the fear of job loss, the fear of how I'm going to pay my bills, not being able to perform well. The ones that are really struggling right now, especially during this COVID, and are starting to see an increase in anger, are getting cabin fever. They're struggling with having to stay inside and not being able to go out anywhere. And it just leads to anger on top of anger. They don't have an outlet. They don't have coping skills to be able to work through some of that. So Anger can also be triggered by an emotional or by a mental disease. Some people have like bipolar disorder. So that's one of the ways that anger can also be triggered. It's uncontrollable, but it's also not their fault. It's just going to be about learning how to manage the anger.
Yeah. And I've noticed during this pandemic, there's been a lot in the news about, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's been a lot of rise in domestic abuse. Kinds of things might lead to that kind of dysfunction where anger turns to destructive and harmful behaviors.
Well, the thing that's going on now is that people aren't used to being home together so much. Okay. You can be married to your spouse, you can have your children at home, but there's 8 hours in the middle of the day that you don't see them. And, you know, your kids are doing their thing at school, you're doing your thing at work, your husband does his thing at work. But when you have a stay-at-home order, you're now in a confined space and you're not used to having each other there that long. When you come home in the evening, it's different because you get a break from each other. So with the stay-at-home orders, what's happening is people are having to readjust. Their schedules have gone completely out of whack, or they're completely out the window, and they haven't sat down to try to reorganize themselves. And so everybody's getting underfoot. The children are getting cabin fever. They're getting upset. They want to go out and play with friends. And so adults are not used to this, okay? Those extroverts want to be out and about and socializing. The introverts are doing just great. This is fun for them. But even with them, they're having a hard time with stress and anxiety because they don't know what's happening. With the ever-changing things that are going on with coronavirus, people are on edge. And so anything could trigger you into raging or being frustrated. And then if somebody asks you, why are you so frustrated, you're going to go off on them and you're going to be angry, and it's just going to trigger one event after the other. So, you know, people are afraid of how are they going to pay the mortgage? You know, how are they going to get money for bills? You know, how's the rent going to get paid? When is it going to be over? When is it going to be over? I'm ready to go out. I'm ready to do this. With the COVID-19, one of the things that people need to take into consideration is you're going to see the rise in domestic violence because there's no outlets. They've never been prepared for having to stay at home 24/7. And it's really different when you're having to adjust to not being able to go out and do the things that you normally would enjoy. At any other normal time, if somebody got angry, they could just get in their car and go to a park or go to a movie or go do something just to distract themselves. They can't do that right now. So the anger issues are going up. And then when you factor in, you know, I don't know if you've seen on the media, people having virtual parties and they're drinking, that also is going to add to the anger issues. It's going to be a lot easier for somebody to go off on somebody else. And whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs, recreational drugs, whatever, there are going to be those issues that make it harder to get some space to be able to manage the anger. And if they've never had coping skills, they're going to go to something that's going to be easy, and that's usually alcohol. Yeah, alcohol is easy to get to. Part of it, what you're seeing on TV when there's, you know, people killing people or spouses, that domestic violence was probably already there, but with the COVID-19, because there is no break for the abuser and even for the family, it escalates and it just gets worse.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right with the alcohol and the drugs, because they lower those inhibitions, the ability to stop our reactions.
Yes.
You know, and think about what we're doing. I always think about like anxiety and stress, and when multiple people in a household are all anxious and stressed, it just feeds each other, and then your anger just totally escalates. Where it's just like one person's frustrated and they're taking out on the other person, and then it ends up coming out, you know, towards the children or in other ways. So I have seen that a lot too. What steps do you think you would suggest to people who maybe don't have these coping skills like you're talking about, that can help them manage while they are stuck in this space where it is harder to get away? And you do have less access to resources. Maybe people with kids usually would have a caretaker they could turn to step in when they feel their temperature rising, so to speak. But what things can they do when now we don't have those kinds of resources, would you recommend?
Some of the things that I've been talking to my clients about is that they have to look for their normal schedule as much as they can, but then they also have to create a new schedule, a new normal schedule. It's not it's not about being a normal time. This is about creating a schedule that's going to work for everybody. You know, keeping some of the old schedule. When you have kids, kids are used to consistency. They're used to having a schedule. Okay, they're used to getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning because they got to get ready for school and they got to go catch the bus. And then they're used to being at school at 8 o'clock in the morning. And what's happening now is parents have become lax because they think, oh, you know, we got to work this out. We've got to do the homeschooling. But what I tell my clients is you've got to create a schedule. Try to get them as normal as you can. Wake them up at their regular morning time. Now, can they sleep a little bit longer? Yeah, they could, because they don't have the commutes that they have to worry about. But they need to be getting up early enough so that they can start school at 8 o'clock, or the parents can be at work at 8 o'clock, or do whatever would be the normal routine as much as possible. But then it's important for them to look at that schedule and maybe block out some time so that they know that while the parent is working from home, the kids are in school for 2 or 3 hours, and then they can take a lunch break together and then use the afternoon for some recreational stuff, either in the backyard. It becomes a little bit more difficult when a family lives in an apartment. But what I tell them is that they need to find some activities for the kids and give them a break. Allow them 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half of video time to play games, or let them talk to their friends on the phone so that the kids aren't getting upset and antsy. If the kids are managed and their behavior is managed, the parents are going to be able to manage themselves. For couples, I think it's important for them to continue to make some couple time, and then they also need to be able to talk about what they're feeling. It's really important to sit with the kids and with your spouse to be able to talk about what you're feeling during this time. You have to be able to communicate about the frustrations, and you also have to be able to come up with things that you could do together, either as a couple or as a family. You know, go take a picnic out in the backyard, you know, go put a blanket. I had a client who said the neighborhood was laughing at them because they took a blanket out to the front yard and they did social distancing, but they were having a picnic out in the front yard, and as neighbors passed, they were able to say hi and talk to everybody. So they actually got to meet new neighbors. I have couples that have talked about what's going on, and these are couples that were, you know, on the verge of divorce prior to the pandemic. And then now, because they've decided that they're together 24/7, they've realized that there are little things that you don't have to worry about. So it's going to be, a lot of it is communication. A lot of it is just being able to talk about what you're feeling, talk about the frustrations, talk about those fears. Okay, you can't keep the fears bottled up, because those fears will come at you, and at some point they're going to come out as anger. So it's really important to develop a schedule. There's other things that you can do as far as managing your anger, you know, learning deep breathing, relaxation exercises, learning to take a walk or do some exercises. I have clients who will go on a 2 or 3 mile walk just because they're so angry. Okay, it's about giving yourself some space. You've got to find a way to get some space between you and your family so that you can start to manage that anger. It's important to also recognize why you're angry. What is it that's coming up for you? What is the trigger? What's the fear behind that trigger? Anger is fear-based. We get angry because we're afraid that somebody's going to hurt us or something's going to happen. And underneath it, there's a fear. There's a fear that we're going to get hurt. And so we react the way we would normally react, and that is with anger. And anger can be healthy, but anger can also be toxic.
Yeah, that fight response comes out when we're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, and it sounds like most of it is like figuring out a way to give yourself some space, but is there anything else you would suggest for somebody who might be struggling with their anger to help keep themselves safe and keep their family safe when their anger is starting to boil over?
The one thing that I would recommend in order to keep oneself safe or to keep the family safe is to, you got to get away. You got to find a place to get away. You've got to be able to go to your family or your spouse and say, I'm angry and I need a timeout. If the kids are triggering you, if the kids are rambunctious and they're starting to get on your nerves and you feel your anger and you're about ready to start yelling and screaming, what you have to do is you have to look at the kids and say, you know, I need a timeout. Tell your kids that you need a timeout. They're going to understand why that timeout is there. Okay. And then take 30 minutes, take 20 minutes, however long you need to take, and just remove yourself from the trigger. Okay, you've got to think about what is the trigger, why are you angry, what's the fear underneath it, you know, what's the frustration, and what can you do to fight to relax yourself. You know, you can get into some mindfulness, think about what's going on now as opposed to the what ifs. Get away from the what ifs and focus on the what is. That gets you away from those fears that, you know, financially you're not going to make it. You got to figure out what the fear is, and therefore you'll be able to figure out why you're getting angry and why you're so frustrated. But to protect yourself and to protect the family, it is important to give yourself some space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to remove yourself from the situation and calm yourself down. When do you think somebody who is struggling with their anger, or maybe hasn't even really noticed their anger before, but right now it's really escalating, when would you suggest they seek some type of professional help?
The minute they recognize that their anger is out of control, the minute that it causes them to do things that they're going to regret later, the minute that they start raising their voice and they do it more than once. You know, we're human and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to get triggered. And there are going to be times when you can be talking to a spouse or your children and they can say something and it'll trigger you and you might just go off on them and yell. If you recognize that that's a problem and you know you have to do it different and you're in the wrong, make your amends to your family and then stay focused on what's going on. But if it keeps happening over and over and over again, and you find yourself that you keep apologizing and it's becoming insincere, then you need to go seek some help. That's when it's time. If you find yourself, even that very first time that you get triggered into a rage episode and you're raging and you're throwing things, you need to go. You need to go find counseling and seek some help so that you can learn to manage that anger in a different way, in a more healthier way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janie. That's very helpful. For those of you guys who might be struggling with your anger, please know that NFCC is here for you. We're offering telehealth sessions, and you can reach out with questions or go to our resource page. Our website is finnegancounseling.org, and our phone number is 713-402-5046. We are thinking of you all, and we know this is a difficult time. And thank you again, Janie, so much for being here and talking to us and helping us understand anger and how to deal with it better.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.